So Steve Mollenkopf, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. The future of the industry, it feels like everyone is discussing the impact of 5G, the impact of 5G for your business, but the impact of 5G for the consumer, for the business world in general. How are you seeing it evolve?
Well, I see it very kind of in the same way that maybe like you should think of it like electricity or water or these fundamental technology changes that change kind of the way people do business, for example. That's really how people in the industry are thinking about 5G. Clearly, it's going to impact the cellular industry, and you'll see a lot of benefits to the consumer and to the operators, the whole ecosystem. But you're also going to see when you have the ability to connect everything in the world, it's going to change the way people do business. It's going to change the way factories are structured. It's going to change the way we deliver healthcare. It's going to change the way that we do logistics and plan things. And this whole digitization of sort of business and the infrastructure of the world will be very significant. And it's actually one of the reasons why you see so much international desire to be first in 5G. It's because everyone knows the fundamental technologies are so important to the rest of the economy. Make sure that you're not behind.
At the moment, what is the sort of economic impact, do you think? Do you have gauges of how this will be from a US perspective, from a global perspective? Well,
we commissioned a study that tried to look at what is the impact of 5G in goods and services out in 2035. And the number was $13.2 trillion, so just a tremendous amount of money, you know, at the point of super big. By the way, if we did that same study, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was 12.3. So
it's already scaling.
It's already scaling. And what's happening is people are seeing that it's happening. The things that they thought were going to happen are happening. And so I think it's a very positive element. And I would tell you, when we look at the broad customer base or partner, you know, a lot of people come and talk to us about, hey, I know I have to be doing something in 5G. Help us figure out what that is. The number of people and the breadth of companies that come talk to us has actually increased, consistent with that, you know, sort of proxy value that I just gave.
So what are some of the more interesting or surprising industries that have walked in your door wanting help?
You know, what's really, two of them, I think. One is, I would say, industrial, people's factories. What you want to see in factories is, I want to be able to reconfigure it very, very quickly. And the data that comes off my machines, like a robot that's making a car, for example, tremendous amount of data comes off there. It is the actual fundamental IP of the car company, is how do I make the car, and then how can I reconfigure the factory? And what that means is they can now change how quickly they can react to the market in terms of having, you know, different, you know, model year reconfigured very quickly. Tremendous desire to do that. The other one is logistics. So if you think about, for example, a city like New York, moving things around, we really haven't done dramatic changes in the technology to move things around other than to just create more streets. But when you can connect everything and you can figure out how to optimize that, and you can do all the AI and you can do all the big data on moving goods and services, you know, people and things around a city, and as cities grow larger, it's tremendous, tremendous advantage to those cities to figure out how to do that. There's a lot of desire for people to get things connected so they can start that problem, you know, in a big way.
So do you feel this sense of responsibility that you're a driving force behind this technology, that you're in the race to win it for the US to a certain extent?
Yeah, I mean, probably broader than the US, actually. I mean, if you think about it, so our business model really, if you go way back, sort of the highest level of abstraction, is about it's about really creating a bigger pie. So you're trying to make the market grow, and then particularly in areas where a market is developing that didn't develop before, we do very well in terms of creating value for our shareholders. And so what we think about is, how do I create an industry that doesn't exist? What are the fundamental technologies we need to create? How do we get them into the standards bodies, and then how do we scale them, meaning share them with everyone? What we don't do, because we're not good at doing this, is figure out what is the end product. What we try to figure out is, what is the hardest technology and what can we deliver the biggest piece so that people can innovate on top of it. And so from that perspective, you look and say, wow, okay, logistics is going to be big, you know, digital healthcare is going to be big. What do we need to do so that 10 years from now, some company will be, you know, that everyone will know, will develop and use these technologies? If we can do that, we'll be able to deliver for our shareholders and really deliver for this goal to grow the pie, I guess.
So what do you need to do? How much of it is about working with partners and also working across borders?
We work a lot with, I would say, the end users of the technology that we work on. We try to figure out not so much what their problems are, but enough of the use cases to know what are the technologies that you need. So for example, we've been working on 5G for over 10 years, and we've been saying, okay, what is it that we have to put in, what do we have to invent from a cellular perspective so that all of these things can happen? We're doing that for the next 10 years. So there's just this huge kind of pipeline and conveyor belt of technologies. Now why we get that, because we go talk to people. We talk to hospitals, we talk to car companies, we talk to cities, and we try to figure out what is it that we need to try to provide from a connectivity point of view so that they can do it. And it's even broader, so you go, well, if you look back in our history, not only did we provide the cellular piece, but we said, well, if people have connectivity, they have digital connectivity in their pocket, they're going to want to stream video. So somebody better figure out how to do all the coding and encoding, which Qualcomm's very, very strong in doing, and historically has really led the industry in a very strong IP position. And because we knew if you have that connectivity, you're going to want to do this next thing, so we better invent the things that allow you to do that next thing. And that's what kind of keeps everybody excited in the company, is working on these big fundamental problems.
And being able to see round corners, being able to see that people are going to want to see video on their phone even though they might not know it yet.
Correct.
Is it, as you as an executive, do you have to hear these voices coming from within the company? How accessible do you have to be to ensure that you're hearing that coming from your employee base?
Yeah, I would say part of it is reflected in the culture of the company. So we're a very technical company. And I would say and it was the way it was founded and the way it still is run, is almost like a research group at a big university. Okay. A lot of information flow. I would say very little hierarchy, really, when you talk about how information is shared. But if you think about it, though, we're not trying to figure out what the end product is. We're just trying to figure out what is the key technology to enable a bunch of end products that no one thought about. And so from our perspective, it's actually a much easier problem than trying to figure out what the end product is. And so our approach is, we're not good at doing that, the end product. So therefore, but we're very good at figuring out the fundamental technologies and getting other people to the point where they can innovate on top of it. And so it's a little bit easier, oddly, to be able to figure out kind of what is the infrastructure underneath of business versus the exact product that we'll need 10 years from now.
When you look at how you're integrating yourself from a global perspective as well, there's much fear that the technology is a race. 5G is mutually exclusive. We're either going to win it in the US, or Europe's going to be ahead, or China's going to win it. Do you see that level of competition and mutually exclusive winner takes all?
I don't, actually. So the kind of the red-blue world that people talk about, I actually don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to see really the continuation of international standards. So, for example, if you go back 10 years, 15 years in the cellular industry, there really was an attempt to kind of create a Chinese standard and an American standard or a Western standard. And it really failed. Neither one had the scale that was really helpful for the industry. And I think you're going to continue to see international standards bodies become or continue to be very important, particularly in the cellular world. Now the battle is who's going to have influence in the international standards body. So you see a lot of that, but that's been happening. That's a 30-year-old, issue for everybody. Different players are being strong. If you go back 20 years, the Europeans would have been much stronger in those standards bodies. Today, a lot of the Asian companies, not just China, but also South Korea and Japan, very, very strong. So for us, it's I don't see kind of this general decoupling that people talk about. And I think that would actually be quite dangerous for both sides if that were to happen. Now, for Qualcomm, the interesting thing that, at least from my perspective, you hear is people are always saying, well, it's Qualcomm versus Huawei or something. Well, Qualcomm and Huawei, if they don't cooperate, you won't have 5G as an international standard. It's actually not in the interest of both companies to create this separation, so it doesn't happen. Now, we do compete with each other for IP and market space in certain areas, although we're in different market segments. But really, both of us need to cooperate in order to have 5G grow. And we do. And you can see that in the standards bodies. How
do you keep those lines of communication open when, seemingly from a government perspective, the lines of communication are pretty tough at the moment?
It's really just it's a different conversation. So it's about we need to get 5G for both our businesses and really for the ecosystem. And it just happens. I mean, there's a lot of I would say it's not as complicated as people make it out to be. The standards bodies and technology. Remember, we're both. I mean, not just the two companies, but in general, There's a lot of activity at the technical level, and it dominates the discussion. There's really not a lot of, I would say, geopolitical discussion when you're really talking about driving technology, which is good.
Scientist on scientist rather
That's
than
right.
a political expert element to it. What about in terms of, therefore, competition as you see it? Because you have to be so-called frenemies with so many of these businesses.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies you supply to also you compete with. How do you find that as an executive?
Well, it's part of the I don't know if it's skill, but certainly the requirements of being, in a similar seat to mine, and there are a number of people who are in similar seats, is that you have to be able to navigate those things. So there's a lot of, I think, personal contact with a lot of our partners in order to figure out how to resolve things that might create conflict. But it's not, in a lot of industries, as a company grows and becomes more significant, has more international scale, two things happen. One is you have to figure out how to solve those things if you're at the top of that company. The other thing that happens is that you need to be able to compete on a worldwide basis, which means if you're not as competitive as the most competitive person worldwide, you won't be successful anywhere. You can't retreat to a corner, for example. And so that tends to happen. So companies tend to, quite frankly, really have similar competitive ambitions, regardless of where their headquarters is, because the market that they participate in is international.
Talk to us about those personal communications. 5 years as a CEO, and many will look at the tenure you've had and think no other CEO can have navigated the back-to-back nature of issues, concerns, crises, some might call it, legal battles with key customers such as Apple, activist investors, M&A that didn't go your way when you're the purchaser, M&A that perhaps went your way when you were the target. Is it about the personal communication that perhaps, for example, got you through the Apple situation?
Well, here's one thing that is helpful. We kind of live we play in a very tough gym. It's really kind of the way to talk about it. So we're not unaccustomed to competing. And in the history of our company, and a lot of us have had long tenure there, you have a lot of ups and downs. And so we know that as long as you have good technology, you'll get yourself through to the other side. And so you have to make sure that you don't lose the focus on providing that. And of course, we didn't, which a lot of people, I would think, give us credit for, which I give credit to the team for doing that. And then it's really make sure that you keep your eye on the long goal and don't I would say, live inside your own head, meaning you'll get a lot of voices telling you what to do, and you have to make sure that you kind of keep track of that whole thing. Now, from my side, I probably have a demeanor that allows me to do that easier than other people. But we made it through because we have good technology and we're focused on kind of the right things for the long term of remaining relevant in the industry. And if you have that, you can figure out the rest as long as you don't panic.
I like the way you say your demeanor. Many say you're calm, you're highly analytical, you have the self-confidence to stick to your convictions, the courage to stick to your convictions. Do you think at times people have wanted you to be more fiery in some way and wish that you had the outbursts that some other executives did?
Yeah, I think maybe that narrative may not be accurate, actually. I would say, really, we may look very genteel, maybe. I don't know if that's true, but this is again a tough gym. We're used to throwing elbows and kind of catching elbows, but we're comfortable with a lot of uncertainty, I would say, which is one of the key things. I think this industry and in our position in it is actually not. You're not really very methodical. You can't be. You don't know enough information to be methodical. You have to make decisions before you have the information. And otherwise, you're not driving the industry. Meaning, if it's just, I'm going to measure what the industry needs, I'm going to provide it, that's one level of innovation. A more valuable innovation is, I'm going to create the things that the industry needs. And that, you can't be methodical. You have to have kind of good judgment and have people around you that can help you figure out what you can do before it's clear what you need to do. And I've been very fortunate to have people that allow me to do that.
How have you kept the focus of your people, of your team in these situations? Well,
it's a very engineering-focused company. The things that you're talking about are make sure that we have great products and that we're the leader in 5G, really, if you think about it. And That's what engineers like to do. That's actually what I like to do. And so that's when they wake up in the morning, kind of undisturbed, that's what they do. And so we've been very fortunate from a cultural perspective that that's what's prized in the industry. And that's you see that from Qualcomm, hopefully, in when you meet the people and you see kind of the website and all these things. And we're about great products and technology. And so a lot of it is sort of keeping them from getting distracted from the news that they can read, but really doesn't affect them at the end of the day. And we were effective in doing that.
I like the way you talk about elbows and that you basically can live with an era of uncertainty, because the uncertainty does continue. There's still issues about whether really the business model of licensing can continue in the way it does now. And of course, ongoing antitrust investigations, whether it's the FTC or the EU. How confident are you of the licensing part of the business model?
I think the hard part's behind us, quite frankly. There's always risk, particularly, in a business like ours, there's always risk. But we've done a lot of things over the last several years. Obviously, the stay that we got was very, very important. But underneath of that, we've signed up so many new agreements and big anchor agreements that really set the framework for the licensing business going forward that makes me feel very good about it. Now, anytime you have a large business like this, you have to pay attention to the risks, and we do. But I would tell you, the way we think about it internally is you need to be careful, but a lot of the hard work is behind us, we think.
What about from a personal perspective, when it did get a bit personal, when the previous leader of the business, Paul Jacobs, seemed to suddenly come on the other side of the table from you, having groomed you to become CEO to a certain extent? You were the first non-family member to lead Qualcomm, then suddenly wanted to take the company private. How did that feel as a leader? I think people made way too much out of that, quite frankly. It actually didn't kind of, behind the scenes, it wasn't what people kind of made it out to be. So I don't think there's a lot of residual issues associated with all of that. But we went through a lot of things. We went through a lot of things together, and it was that's kind of behind us. And so that's sort of the way that people view it. One of the benefits of having so much to do and drive 5G is you tend to forget about history and you just kind of move forward, and it's a healthy thing. And a healthy thing for a business that has so many lifers, to a certain extent. You've been there, more than 25 years. How common is that? Do you have a lot of people who've been there for significant numbers of years? We do.
In fact, if you look at the company, we have a lot of people that are senior execs that they may have reported to people that reported to me, I reported to, and it's very common. So what you find is it's a team of leads who are more tied by their connection to the company than the org chart. Very helpful. It's an incredible asset to have, I think, as a CEO. Now, one of the benefits we have, quite frankly, is being headquartered in San Diego. We're a very large employer in San Diego. I assume we're the largest in San Diego. And there are a lot of people that just have this great feeling about the company, have the community, things that we do in the community, and we use that to our benefit because we have these people that have this great history. They know when something goes wrong, as long as we have good things, we can fix it. And so it's a great asset for me to have. How
international, therefore, does your footprint become, and how do you ensure that culture is not just sat in San Diego, but you can breed that sense of loyalty and desire to be part of the business when they're based elsewhere?
Well, we do. If you look, our employee base is actually spread around the world. And what we had to do probably about 10, 15 years ago was the complexity of the product grew so much that it was impossible to make it in any one site. Okay, so the traditional approach when people have multi-sites is I'm going to take this product, it's going to be done in this place, and you can draw these sort of boundaries around what a site does. We can't do that because the product is so complex. We have thousands and thousands of people that work on one of these products. So you're forced by just to create the product, to have every site talk to each other. And so what we've done, typically what we do is we take somebody who is very strong culturally, for example, and we'll have them as the lead of the site, and then we'll have a mirror on the other side that basically talks to them every day. And so it's kind of old school ground game, call the person, text the person, communicate with them, and that's been very, we've solved that problem a decade ago.
It feels like again and again your business comes down to being personal and having a personal level of communication. Do you think that is common in science-based businesses, or is it something that perhaps the outside looking in doesn't understand about the way in which scientists need to work?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think in general, and it's not communication as, hey, I know everything, I'm going to communicate it to people. It is, you have a collective brain, figure out culturally how to pull from that collective brain, and then be humble enough to change your mind. And then for me, I actually view it as don't make a decision until the very last minute because new information may show up, and your team, if you listen to them properly, will keep you from doing something really stupid. And that's been the recipe, for a long time. You also have to be aggressive in your goals, meaning hate to lose. You want to make sure you win. And we've been fortunate to have that in the company. It's certainly something that I think I have.
Okay, so you can train in the hard gym. You like to have the ambition. Innovation seems to be the key priority when it comes to Qualcomm. The way in which what can you put on your business cards? Yeah.
If you have patents, you can put a little thing that says you're an inventor. When you walk into our headquarters, the first thing you see is a patent wall. Okay. And so it is. It is an innovation culture. It's something we celebrate, it'll continue to be what drives the business moving forward.
How do you continue to drive the business moving forward and make sure that you're the employer of choice as well at the moment? How do you get your message out there? Is it going to schools, universities, ensuring that they know the amount of patents, the achievements as an inventor that they can have with you?
Two things. I think one, engineers and technical people, they like to work on things that have kind of international relevance. And the best example of that is that some people like to sit and tell their spouse, their family, what have you, I worked on X, and they wanted to make sure, and if it's something that they know about, they have a tremendous sense of pride. So working on something that people care about, has international, extent, is number one. So you have to be working on the right things. The other one is I think people want to work for a company that does things the right way. Good members of the community, take care of people the right way, and have a good culture. Culture sells the company in a large way and keeps people in the company. And so for us, it's been a great asset in kind of cultivating that or making sure that continues to thrive is a big component of senior leadership.
Is that something that you've seen over your tenure that you've had to focus more and more on?
Yeah, and I would say, if you kind of look at the last 5 years, for example, a lot of it was our culture kept us focused on the right things. And so people, the employee base noticed that, actually. There was, I think, a little bit of, hey, we're actually much better than what people are saying. Yeah. And I kept telling them, look, don't let people get inside of your head. You don't get so high when people are telling you we're doing great, and don't get low when people say we're doing poorly. Focus on what we're working on, and if what we're working on is important, it'll be reflected long term. So don't worry about the kind of the high frequency noise on this thing.
How do you manage to drown out the noise? Social media is so intense, but there's also your stock price you can be looking at, and analysts, investors. How do you ensure that you're listening to the right people at the right time?
You never know. It's sort of, that's where I think just general demeanor or who you are, kind of how you got there is sort of important. I don't know the answer to it, but I can tell you I probably can deal with more uncertainty than the average person, and that's been helpful, in the last half a decade or whatever.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, actually.
And how did how did you navigate that when you came into Qualcomm?
Okay, so I didn't navigate anything. In general, my belief is that people underestimate what they can do. They're not smart enough to figure out a career path. So do the following things. Work for a company that if you do the right things, they will reward you. Maybe not exactly at the time you want, but you'll get rewarded eventually. The second thing is work on what the company needs you to work on. And don't sort of overthink, I should be working on this project because that'll help me on X, Y, Z. For me, I actually ended up working on the projects that were never the key projects until they were. Mm-hmm. And so, being able or being comfortable to take those risks or to was really what propelled my career to get there. Not only from I got great opportunity, but you kind of build a little bit of confidence when you have to deal with this issue that is XYZ that may be difficult. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of that early in my career and get comfortable probably earlier than a person who didn't have that trajectory.
So sort of just enjoying exactly what you're doing in the moment and not always seeking to ensure that you've carved the right path.
Yeah. I think also if there's something really hard that the company has to deal with, I'd much rather that I was making the decision on it than someone else. And so there's a little bit of responsibility there, but there's also a little bit of opportunistic sort of, I don't know what the right term is, but you're basically, it's stress, but it's a positive stress.
Yeah.
And if you are kind of in control of your own destiny, even if it's a hard problem, I think there's not as much stress there as what people think.
What gives you most excitement, most optimism now, as you put as you say, a lot of the challenges behind you and you look forward? It seems that everyone's now really listened to you and understood the opportunities of 5G. How do you make sure that you continue to execute in the way that you want to?
I would say I'm thinking so far out where we are today. The things that people are talking to us, and maybe inherent in that question, those are things we really did over the last 5 years. So what we're seeing is the things that we knew were going to happen over the last 5 years or so. What's exciting to me is what is the potential for 5G, for example, outside of the phone space. The phone space, it's going to be great. It's going to be great for our business, and I think people are excited about that now. And we are, of course. But the bigger issue is, okay, we are very strong in the fundamental technology that's going to change the way that business happens worldwide. How do we take advantage of that? And the concern I have is not so much, are we going to be able to benefit from it? It is, what will I look back and regret that we didn't do because the opportunity was big and we didn't have, we didn't take we didn't take advantage of the big opportunity that's sitting in front of us. And so that's an exciting problem to have, and one that I think is interesting for the company.
What are some of the things? Can you paint a picture of some of the things that you're having to think about?
Well, here's a great example. So we talked about $13.2 trillion of economic value, sort of a proxy for the economic value of 5G. Well, we're one of the key companies for providing that technology. So how is it that we organize our business from a business model, channel, partners, to get our fair share of that $13.2 trillion? And remember, the majority of that is outside of the handset space. So what is it that we have to do? And I'll give you a great example of where in our history we had key technology, but really didn't pick up the end value. So if you go back 20 years, we had all of the key technology for position location. Continue to have very strong position in the IP for position location. And it's maybe kind of do the 2000 to 2005 timeframe. All of your phones had position location, and it was really for E911. So if my car rolls over, let's make sure I can call someone. Great application, very important. Glad that we put it in there. But the real value was, if I can position a person who's connected to the internet, I can create these businesses that didn't exist. So now you have Uber. Now you have all of these picture sharing. I'm at a place I can share a picture. Tremendous economic value created by very small introductions of technology. The 5G revolution is going to introduce 10 times more technology into industries that can take advantage of it. So what is it that Qualcomm needs to do to figure out how to take advantage of that technology change? That's a great problem, kind of an interesting one to work on. It's not it's not hundreds and billions of dollars of OpEx to figure out how to do it. It is this same management team. How do we think about this problem so that in 5 years, in 10 years, we've put ourselves in this great position? That's the challenge in moving forward.